What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Gravity Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Chris. Thank you for choosing to tune in today. Hey, folks, we're back at it. How do you stay grounded in a world full of noise and chaos? What are your foundations? What are the things that help you not get carried away with fears and anxieties? Now, there's things that are going to scare us, right? And there's things that are worth fighting over. I genuinely believe. And I see us sometimes, I see me sometimes getting worked up over things that aren't worth it. They just aren't worth it. And when I get back to my foundation of faith and family and our core values, I realize, yeah, that one isn't worth me getting worked up over. And then I move on, and it's freeing. So I'm hoping here on the podcast, as we bring different guests on, I'm hoping it's creating the opportunity for you to ask the question, do I agree with this person in their thoughts, in their beliefs? And you might go, no, I don't. And if that causes you to re-examine your foundations, then mission accomplished. That's what I'm hoping. If it causes you to maybe not agree, and maybe you change some of those foundations. That's happened in my life. My foundations, although they might be what I build a lot of my life on, I've realized that some of the things that I believed to be true previously aren't as definite as I used to believe that they were. And then sometimes, like I said, sometimes it really reaffirms my foundations. So that's what we're hoping you're doing here on the podcast. Hey, today on the show, we're going to have Garland Hunt Jr. Garland is a life coach. He has a background in church ministry. He grew up as a pastor's kid. Him and I had a pre-interview before this episode, and we had a really good conversation, but I still didn't totally know just where we were going to go. And we had an amazing interview, and the things that we spoke about, the things that Garland brought up, I think are going to benefit you in your life. Whether you decide to go out and hire a life coach or not, whether this motivates you to go connect with a counselor or not, if you get curious with the things that Garland brings up and maybe ask yourself some of these questions, I think it could really have a transformative impact on your life. So I'm excited for us to get into our conversation with Garland. But before we do that, folks, I want to talk about the hat, the shirt, and the coffee mug that I'm sporting today. That organization is Deliver Fund. Deliver Fund is a nonprofit that's using terrorist hunting technology. So the technology that our military, that our CIA uses to hunt terrorists around the world, they're using that to hunt human traffickers, people that are promoting and causing human slavery to continue to happen in 2024, 2025 here in a little bit. Deliver Fund is solving the problem. They realize that law enforcement really doesn't need more door kickers. They know how to kick doors in. So if they know where the bad guys are, they can kick the door. The problem is finding the bad guys. The problem is rescuing the folks that are being trafficked. And Deliver Fund is using that technology to scour open source content and then to deliver, I didn't mean to use that word there, Deliver Fund, deliver, and then to give law enforcement and prosecutors a solid case based on data that is going to point towards the human trafficker. And it's equipping law enforcement to go out and get search warrants to rescue victims, to prosecute criminals. And at the time of me doing an interview with Shane, one of their employees, I think maybe operations manager, they were at 100% prosecution rate, meaning people either pled guilty or they were successfully prosecuted 100% of the cases that went to the prosecutor. And I don't know if they're still there or not. With case law, eventually that'll probably change. But bottom line is they're doing solid work. They're a nonprofit. I use money from this podcast, not that this is generating money, but from the teaching work that I go out and do with Gravity Consulting and Training, I use a portion of that money to support Deliver Fund because they are crushing evil by putting people behind bars. So if you haven't checked them out, folks, please check them out today. Deliverfund.org. It's down in the show notes. With that, folks, let's get into this interview with Garland Hunt Jr. Garland Hunt Jr., welcome to the Gravity Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Chris. This is beautiful, man.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you, one, for being willing to come on the show, and then also your flexibility. Obviously, a lot has happened in my life over the last 4 or 5 months, and your flexibility really means a lot to me. One, to graciously tell me you were okay with me canceling this because we had this planned 3 months ago, I think, 4 months ago, and then your willingness to reschedule. I really appreciate you.
Of course, brother. Of course, of course. I mean, I don't know if this is the forum for it, but how are you doing, Chris?
Yeah, it's tough. Like yesterday is a great example of the kind of the roller coaster of grief. The roller coaster of losing my daughter was yesterday morning. I'm out running with a group of police administrators from Washington State. They're having their state training event in my city right now. And one of the deputy chiefs had asked me to organize a 5K run or to help her organize. I kind of went out and found the route. She did the organization really. And so I'm out running with these folks, and conversation comes up, and I talk about it just like I'm talking to you right now. And then fast forward 4 hours, I'm sitting in Veterans Court. So we have a number of therapeutic courts in our region for folks that have gotten in trouble for things, but there's extenuating circumstances in these therapeutic courts, from mental health court to drug court to veterans court, create this opportunity for a lot of accountability and ultimately make that criminal charge go away because recognizing of the contributing factors. So I'm sitting in veterans court, and the at the very end of it, the judge mentions one of the clients that's not there. And the reason he's not there is because he lost his 21-year-old son this weekend. And I start crying. So I go from early in the morning where I'm talking about it on this run, and I'm specifically talking about my girl, Danielle, and there's no tears. I'm not feeling any huge emotional anything. I'm talking about very much in that prefrontal cortex cognitive level. And then a few hours later, I'm not talking about my Danielle, and someone mentions another father losing his son, and it connects with me on that emotional level. So that really describes kind of how I think all of my family is, although I think we're all doing it in different ways. But there's times that we're strong and just celebrating life. And I'm happy for that, celebrating birthdays and holidays. And then there's times that the reality just hits us differently, and it hurts. Yeah.
I make up that grief is it's a marathon, and maybe an unending one on some level. I have not experienced that kind of grief, Chris, um, and so it's more of a process of, and maybe you can speak to this, but it's more of a process of living with some level of grief for the long haul. I think
Yeah.
evolves. I think that we evolve in it and through it, and how we relate to it, or the frequency of time that we're in it or experiencing it in our body. But like it feels like it is a new part of our journey. Um, you know, holding the beauty of life and this grief.
Yeah. From my friends that have walked through similar or the same, meaning they've lost a child or they've lost a spouse. And I just put it in that category because, like, when we lose our grandparents, it's sad. And there's also some, yeah, they lived they were 70, they were 80, they were 90. We kind of expected that. They were supposed to go before us. And when you lose someone you don't expect, I think there's just a different processing. And from those friends, that's what they've told me. They said it never stops hurting. You just get stronger. And so some people will ask me, how do you do it? And the best answer I can give them, there's certainly a lot of ways I could answer that question on a spiritual level, on a tangible, like discipline level. And I usually a lot of times will just answer it on the discipline level because it's very simple. I wake up every day. I uh, I get ready, whatever that entails. Meaning maybe I take a shower, maybe I put on deodorant. I get dressed and I leave the house. That's the way I do it. And I don't know any other way to try to, I guess, encourage someone who's going through any type of loss, because there's so many different losses from losing a relationship, right? I mean, someone goes through a divorce, that's a loss. That hurts, that cuts deep. And I don't think my loss is more than their loss because it's so different on how we all experience it based on past history of other losses. And so, but that's when it comes to a discipline level, kind of what tangible things do you do? Those are some of the tangible things I do. I wake up, I get ready, and I go out and I do something. And there's some days that is really easy and in some ways therapeutic, right? Just connecting with other people and just getting out of the house. And then there's some days that's really hard and I want to isolate. And in some ways, we let ourselves isolate sometimes. Some ways, after a really busy week and a lot of human interaction, my wife and I will decide that today's going to be an isolation day. Today, we're just going to stay in the house. We're not going anywhere. And, for the introverts listening, they probably really relate with that. They're like, hey, that's just my Tuesday night. That's my Monday through Friday. Uh, and so I think it's just, you have to be honest with yourself on what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Is it healthy? And do I need to push myself to do something different?
Yeah, yeah. And obviously, we don't have to be here for the entire podcast, but I do wonder the question that comes up, and this might help us kind of find a way elsewhere as well. How does one relate to God in the midst of deep grief?
That's a hard one to answer. Uh, it it hasn't been hard for me. I put an asterisk on that because but I have seen other people in my family really grapple with that. How can an all-loving, all-powerful God allow our 23-year-old sister and daughter to die? Um, and I can't answer that necessarily in ways that always appease other people, because saying things like his ways are greater than our ways, and if we look at this from an eternal perspective of if we believe in heaven and hell, and if we believe that Christ died on the cross for our sins, then we believe that based on Danny's profession of faith, that that's where she is right now, is in heaven, right? And better is one day there than 1,000 anywhere else. And so she's experiencing the victory. But that's a lot of that is very intangible ways, especially for someone who doesn't believe that, someone who hasn't been exposed to Scripture, to the Bible specifically, maybe has been but doesn't believe in the narrative that Christians believe that the Bible is.
Mhm.
So for me, like as a Christ follower, as a Bible believing Christian, I couldn't read for at least a couple weeks. Like, I mean, I tried,
Mhm.
and I definitely spent some time in prayer, but not like before. And and so I asked my praying friends to pray for me. I asked
Mhm.
my Bible reading friends to read the Bible for me, and they would send it to me in these little bite-sized chunks. And so again, I guess if someone is a person of faith, or even if they're not, if they're just curious and they go through this extreme grief, it's like any other relationship, in that you got to spend time in it for it to grow. And so in your grief, or in my grief, I guess I should only speak through my own experience here. In my grief, I have been angry with God. I have asked God these questions, just like I would with my wife. If I was upset with her, I'd be engaging her and discussing things with her. And the harder part, especially for folks that might be newer to faith, is you're not going to, well, I haven't heard God's audible voice. I've I believe God has spoken to me through other people, both Christians and atheists. I believe God has spoken to me through his word, through the Bible. I believe God has spoken to me through the Holy Spirit speaking to me and having this intense leading or confirmation of questions I'm asking. So I don't know. What do you think? That again, I feel like some of these answers might not satisfy people with, especially if they're going through big grief. I don't think I would throw it at them without them soliciting it because of. Uh, I feel like it could feel very incomplete for someone who doesn't believe.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I don't think there is an answer that would suffice. I think that um, we are in um, gosh, we have different cultures, internal cultures or spiritual worldviews and lenses
Oh yeah,
world. And then there are different stages of our grief where it's like, I literally can't hear you try to logic your way through how it
yes,
works. You know what I'm saying? And so I guess my heart is to just be with the folks that are in it.
yes. That's the best thing, honestly, that you can do.
I think it's just the most healing thing you could possibly do. Not try to like tell them like it's gonna be okay. Well, sort
No,
of.
it's not.
Like maybe,
Yeah,
but like it's just being with them feels like the most important thing. Just the human connection and spirit connection, spirit to spirit connection. Just being in the same room, not being alone. Like I think that is the most healing experience one could have in that situation. I think.
I think you're spot on, Garland. I really do, especially when I reflect on the way people have attended us and cared for us. And honestly, that has been the most helpful. Is people simply being. I think that was well said. Hey, usually we don't do this at 12 minutes into the episode, but I really appreciate you checking in with me at the beginning. For the listeners that haven't ever heard your voice before, don't know who Garland Hunt Jr. is, can you give a brief introduction of who you are?
Yeah, I am Garland Hunt Jr. My world is half entertainment. I am a producer and partner at a production company called Cypher Studios. We make premium documentaries for their first window theatrical release and theatrical release documentaries. I've had a beautiful success after death last year. And then the other side of my world and what is a focus of mine currently is my coaching world. So I have a ministry background. My dad was a pastor. I grew up in ministry in my whole life. I ended up in full-time ministry as well myself here. Grew up in Georgia, but moved to California, out here in California. So I was serving at a church for about 17 years, not full-time those entire 17 years, but full-time the last 5. And when I felt the calling to step into something different in my life, I stepped into coaching. And gosh, it was very much so a new frontier. Is about maybe 5 years ago. And so I stepped in, but in about 3 months, had a full list, a full practice of folks that I was serving, and it's just incredibly powerful. I called some friends, and before I knew it, I had 30 coaches working as coaches under my umbrella. Um, Fast forwarding to now, I am actually merging or bringing over my list and um, my company into a larger, incredible community of coaches in a firm called Novus Global. And so that's my world. I'm coaching with Novus Global and honestly having the time of my life. We get to serve individuals, to celebrities, to professional athletes, to um, you know major brands that you would very much so recognize. And I mean, it's just very, it's some of my favorite work in the world, other than being a dad. It is of my favorite work in the world.
Yeah, I love this. I feel like coaching is, at least in my awareness, it's a newer thing over the last decade or so. And I mean, can you speak to that? Did you also is it new for you as well? And I'm talking about out of the traditional like sports coach and those type of things. But when it comes to this life coach, business coach model, I feel like it's new. And if it isn't, tell me why. If it is, why is there this hunger to be coached?
Yeah, I mean, I think that any high performer that we are aware of, anyone who we would, culture would consider is like crushing it, killing it, there's a very, very high chance they have had a coach and have a coach, right?
Yeah,
Coaching historically has been this kind of luxury. And, if you have a lot of disposable income, then you can invest in yourself in this way. And now it's not as much that it's new, it's that it's newly accessible. uh,
okay.
right? So I think that, culturally we have, coaching is now more accessible than ever, where, any of us, if we decide to, can get that advocate for us, right? That powerful developmental relationship in our life where, we are looking to our future and really exploring the conversation around, like, what are we capable of, right? Um, what can we actually accomplish if I actually, step into these ideas of integrity or ownership or feedback and, leadership challenges, all those things. Like, if I really lean into those places and get curious about blind spots in my own life, or belief systems that are holding me back or limiting me, what's possible, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we as a culture, we're in this kind of like self-help space right now as a culture. We're just trying to, I love it. We're trying to grow, and it's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. And so now more than ever, more people are hiring a coach, and it's a powerful, powerful advocate to have in your corner.
Now, why do you think, and I agree with everything you just said, why do you think we are gravitating towards coaches versus maybe the traditional, I find someone in my organization, I ask them to mentor me? Why coaching? Because really this coaching model that I've been seeing, it's tradition or not traditionally, it is typically outside of your organization because
Mhm.
most, coaching firms are not part of their company. uh, why the coach versus the mentor? And I don't think we have to pick one or the other, but I hear a lot more talk about coaching versus what I heard about maybe before that of finding a mentor to mentor you.
Yeah, I think there's some pretty clear distinctions between coaching, mentorship, consulting, and counseling, right? Right.
Yeah,
The ideas, and I'm sure folks in these spaces might tear some of these definitions apart, but the idea around, therapy and counseling, you're doing a lot of work in kind of like understanding your past, right? Like how the past is impacting your present, how the past is
yeah,
mindset and belief systems and reaction times and family of origin, like, like that's a lot of that work, right? I see consulting, and I think I would put mentorship in there as well, where it's a lot of advice, right? It's very industry specific, right? You get
mm,
a consultant or a mentor in your industry or in your business or in your little actual company, right?
yeah,
Where there's a lot of advice given and how to, that mentor or is several steps ahead of you or what have you, so that they are able to provide um, um, a lot more, advice, right? They're kind of telling you what to do in some ways, right? Uh,
yeah,
I see coaching as really this beautiful exploration of inquiry, right? Into the future, right? So, when you get a coach, I have zero engineering background, and I have clients that I have coached for years who are stellar engineers with some of the largest companies in the world, right?
Yeah.
And I can't mentor them or advise them in engineering at all, right? But the process of coaching is actually not about any kind of industry specific skill sets. It's about um, coaching is three-legged. That's kind of how we consider it in the firm. It's vision, it's mindset, and strategy, right? And so what we're tackling in coaching is what is your vision, right? Like the vision is the boss. How can we get clear about your vision? How can
Yeah.
we get specific about your vision? How can we expand your vision, right?
Mm,
This idea of when we create a vision, usually we create a vision inside of this idea of like an intuitive fence. Like what's intuitive for me? Like that's what do I think is attainable? We don't venture into the spaces of what's potentially impossible, right? Right.
yeah. Yeah.
What's out of that default future into that kind of the generative future. We oftentimes don't even venture into that space because it's scary. And what if I fail? And I don't know how to do that. I've never
Yes.
done that before, right? And so leaning into those ideas of vision is so important. So once we get clear on what that vision and we even play with expanding that vision, we get into that space outside of that intuitive fence where we can really lean in and see, I wonder if I can actually accomplish this. I've never done any of these things before. I'm curious, what am I capable of? Right. And so vision, and then we dig into mindset, and mindset is just there are so many uh, barriers to the way that we think. We oftentimes think in very like binary terms, right? It's like either I do this or I do this. Well, the truth is that there are a million ways of tackling this issue, having this conversation, and really breaking out of some of those mindset barriers that we don't even know that we're living with. To be honest, the deepest mindset barriers are the ones we don't even realize, right? Like
The unconscious ones.
right, yeah, yeah, yeah. If I ask like Chris, like what do you think is holding you back? You'd like give me a list of things, and then there's a whole list of things under that that you're not even aware of, and
Yes.
so like the deeply rooted mindset barriers, right? And then we get to hop into strategy, and like we get to really stretch our brain. Our brains are naturally these problem solvers that we our brains want to figure it out. And so as we set that vision, our brain starts doing the work, right? And finding a pathway to that goal. And we get to be along for the ride.
Wow, I love what you thank you for that preview. And where I was going specifically with the listeners of this podcast, I mean, I don't know everyone's profession, but I know we do have a lot of first responder and military folks. And I've heard that from them before. I'm a firefighter. That's all I am. That's all I'm capable of. I'm a police officer. That's all I am. That's all I'm capable of. And the reality is that may be all of your awareness of what you're capable of, but that vision might be so much bigger. I just interviewed a guy named Mike Murata. He's a retired San Antonio police officer, and now he's the executive director of Warriors Heart, Virginia, helping our veterans, our warrior class, heal their brains and their bodies. And he was a line level officer. He wasn't a boss. He wasn't a supervisor, and they saw the leadership potential in him. The folks at Warriors Heart, and knew believed that they could put him in this leadership role as executive director, and he's thriving in it. And so having that help, because again, what's the phrase? You can't see the forest, or you can't see the trees in the forest, or something like that, or you can't see the forest in the trees, or sometimes you don't have the awareness of the things that are tripping you up, like you said. They're just in your unconscious, and until you have someone come in and ask the questions and challenges you to think, you're just not going to get there.
It's the power of community, Chris.
Yeah.
Community. I mean, yes, coaching, right? But it's that idea once again of having a powerful developmental relationship. It's
Yeah.
what community is supposed to be. It's what family is supposed to be. I coming from a ministry background, I always used to say that like therapists, counselors, coaches, we'd all be out of a job if the church community was actually doing what we were fully called to do, you know? Like
Yeah.
we're supposed to be the village. Like we are supposed to be the village for each other and be that mirror for each other and give that powerful feedback that changes our lives and changes our perspective and be in enough deep connection and trusted relationship where we have that relational equity to say, "Hey, Chris, I you said something, and it just can I give you some feedback? Can I be a mirror right now? And maybe it's not
Yeah.
completely true, but maybe we can get curious about where this might be true in your life. Like if we had if we were committed to being that level of advocates for each other as friends and as community members and as family members, man, like we'd all be in a different place.
I went to 34 days of therapy where I was doing roughly about 14 hours of therapy a day for me to figure out some of this stuff, Garland. I mean, for me to, the unconscious stuff, for me to figure out the things that through my life story was tripping me up now as a 46-year-old man. The
Yeah.
things that I was still living by as rules or as laws in my life that were causing dysfunction and problems. And I had a number of aha moments where I was like, oh my gosh, boy, when I was 8, that one thing, I had a good childhood. I had a good childhood. Mom and dad loved me. They showed up. They gave me high fives. I mean, legitimately good. And just like any child, I went through some tough things, right? There was some tough stuff, and it has shaped me, and that's okay. But moving it from that unconscious level to conscious level to where now you're aware of it, to where when it trips you up next time, at least you're like, hey, that just tripped me up. And it puts you in the driver's seat, I think. It
Mm,
puts you in the driver's seat when you have someone, a coach, come alongside of you and say, hey, I had this thing happen this week. Hey, you talked about something like that last time we met. Do you see the similarities here? What's going on? What do you think?
mm.
And just creating that opportunity to unpack it.
Yeah, and I think curiosity is such a beautiful and important part of that process. Jason Jaggard, who is the founder of Novus Global, and has become a dear, dear friend, he says how you do anything is how you do everything, right? Like it's this idea of they're just patterns, right? It's like you came back in and you said, "Oh, this sounds very similar to the last time we talked. We seems like you're dealing with a similar thing." It's like, no, it's completely different. It's completely different because it's a completely different situation. And the person who came to me now, it's like this looks like a pattern, right? And so if we're getting curious, we can really ask ourselves the question, where else is this issue showing up in
Yes.
our lives? It's like, well, people are so like, I don't know, people are so selfish and people always treat me this way, and they always end up doing this to me, and this is how the world works. It's like, well, how the world works, maybe you're a common denominator, right? Where is there ownership for you to take in this, right? This
Yes.
idea of where have you been culpable? Where have you helped to create this system that you are complaining about, right?
Yeah.
It's just when we get curious, we get to find and discover so much about ourselves, and yes, it might be a little bit painful that as we find these parts that we wanted to hide, or we find these parts that we don't want people to see, like that might be painful, right? It's a
Yeah.
heavy lift, but it ultimately puts agency back in our hands, right?
A
We,
100%.
we take ownership, because then we can make a different choice, right? The next time, we can create a different future next time just by being aware, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and taking ownership. So these ideas of ownership, I could talk about ownership for hours and hours and hours. It is such a powerful idea and tool in our life that when we free ourselves from blame.
Yeah. Well, and it puts you in, like you just said, that sense of agency. It puts you in the driver's seat. Otherwise, I'm a victim. I'm a victim to everyone treating me poorly. I'm a victim to This my life and my scenario is always going this way.
Mm,
And when I realized that I'm the common denominator
mm,
and other people don't have the same experience,
mm.
so what do I have control over? What do I have control over? Yeah, it is a nasty world sometimes, you know, and people are sometimes just going to treat you like garbage, and there's nothing you can do about that. But there's a lot we can do about, and get into that mindset piece again, because I think that's the strongest thing that I know I have control over. I have control over my mindset.
Mhm.
When I drive away from my house today, I have zero control. Well, that's not true. I don't have any control over what other drivers do. I have
Yeah,
control over me as a driver and how I operate the car
yeah,
and potentially some defensive driving. But ultimately, that's all I can control. I can't control other people.
yeah, 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 yeah. Agreed. I think that um, there's so many things that are going through my head. I want to pick one. um, uh, Even relationally, right? We, you know, people treat me this way, or this person treated me this way. I get curious about how we are training people to treat us, right?
Oh,
Right, like this idea of sowing and reaping. I wonder, what are we sowing into this relationship that we are reaping this thing that we're complaining about, right? And once again, it's not that there isn't also ownership on the other side. It's just that, maybe we should, the idea of, like, picking out a speck in someone else's eye, but there's a 2x4 in your own eye, right?
yeah.
That biblical principle, it's like, well, let's take a look here first, right? Let's take a look here first. Um and I'm just realizing so many times in my own life, in my marriage, especially in my marriage, in my parenting,
Amen.
in my friendships, I am everything. And this is another, like, ownership statement that can be very difficult for a lot of folks, um but everything I am experiencing is an experience I am creating,
Mm,
right? Like, it's, once again, not capital T true, but where is this true, right? Like,
yeah.
everything I'm experiencing is experience I'm creating. Like, what, all the things that I might be complaining about in my marriage, all the things I might be complaining about with my children, I just wonder how much of that am I creating. How much culpability, how much of that is me creating a system for myself. And we call that a racket, right? Like back in Prohibition, the idea of, like, there was a candy store in the front, but a speakeasy in the back, right? This idea of something that we complain about publicly, but we privately benefit from, right?
Mm,
And this idea of a racket, or some people call it a winning strategy. But these ideas of, there are payoffs to those things that we complain about, and the reason that they have been perpetuated in our lives is because of those payoffs. And we're like, oh, like, I'm I don't know, I'm trying to come up with a complaint, but um why can't I come up with a complaint? I'm usually really good at coming up with complaints. You got a complaint, Chris? What's a complaint in your world?
oh boy, I was not there mentally. I'm still thinking about the candy store and the speakeasy. Um,
Give me a complaint, Chris.
boy, people always cut me off in traffic.
People always cut me off in traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh
people
my
always cut
gosh.
me off in traffic. Yeah, yeah. So this idea of, something we're complaining about publicly, but benefiting from privately. What might be the payoffs for you to be able to say, like, people are always cutting me off in traffic?
It gives me a reason to be angry. Which it justifies why I'm expressing anger, where in reality there's probably some other root causes there that I'm not dealing with. Because really, is it that big a deal when someone pulls in? Because most of the time when I hear that complaint, even when I give it myself, did the person really cut me off? Or did they just cause me to have to engage my brakes a little bit to allow them to get in?
That's
Maybe if
right.
I maybe if I would have recognized they had their blinker on and I was a gentleman, I just would have sat there and slowed down a little bit and allowed them to merge.
That's
You know
right.
what I'm saying?
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. And if we played the game more, you could probably come up with more payoffs, right?
Yeah.
More ways of publicly complaining about this thing, creating, a safe, like, maybe it's, I don't have anything to talk about, so I just talk about people cutting me off, or, it's a safe, comfortable space for me. Like there's just a ton of payoffs of you continuing to perpetuate that idea and that thought and to say that, right?
Yeah.
But there are also costs to it, and sometimes we're not as aware of the costs in our lives, right? To these things that, maybe if complaining about people cutting you off is it's really comfortable for you in a first conversation with someone, but the cost is you don't get to stretch or work the muscles of getting curious about other people. You know,
Mm,
you get to
yeah.
be in the comfort of just talking about yourself and all your complaints, right?
Yeah.
You never actually, I know plenty of people who have lived a lot of life and never learned how to get curious about anybody else,
Yes.
right? Right. I'm picking on you and come up with stuff, but that's how this racket works. And so we'll complain about it forever, but we don't even realize we're getting something in the back because of this, right? We're
Yeah.
getting some payoffs, some payouts.
Yeah. Do you ever have clients? Because I sit there and think this is kind of trendy. It's kind of like mental health professionals in Beverly Hills, 2 decades ago. Man, having a psychiatrist was kind of like and maybe it still is, kind of like, I have a psychiatrist. Oh, I do too. It's like you're in a club almost. And having a coach, I think having a life coach, I think can be somewhat similar at times. It can be kind of um, a status symbol that, hey, I'm this lifelong learner. I have a coach that's working with me. Do you ever have anyone that isn't willing to really? I mean, because what you just made me do there, I mean, you made me get real about why I get frustrated with people cutting me off in traffic, and I was willing to do it. I have to be willing. It's just like a mental health professional. I tell people, you actually have to tell that person what's going on in your mind.
Yeah.
If you don't talk to them, if you don't trust them with these portions of your life, they can't magically read your mind to figure out how to help you. And a coach, I think, is totally the same. You can't coach me if my arms are crossed and I'm sitting on the sideline, right? If I'm just sitting there saying what you I think you want me to hear, but I'm not really willing to do this curious piece where I'm turning inward and getting real with the questions that you're asking me. Have you ever seen that with someone that maybe it's their past, maybe it's a lack of safety, maybe they just don't want to go there, where a client kind of doesn't want to be coached? Verbally, they would say they want to be coached, but they aren't getting real with the process.
Yeah. So one thing I'll say is, even going back to what you were saying around, this kind of prestigious, or this kind of the badge of, like, or a socioeconomic, marker, right, to have
Oh yeah.
a psychiatrist or to have a coach. I also experience the other way around, where sometimes people don't want to talk about it, especially men. Men don't want to admit that we have help,
Yeah.
that we have support.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we're getting better about this as a culture, but oftentimes people, only recently have we gotten comfortable even saying that we have a therapist, that we have a coach, or what have you. And I even have experienced people, especially men, and I can speak as a man here, but there's also this sense of, like, competition. It's like, oh, I don't want you to know I have a coach, so I can outrun you, right? So I can
Ooh, yeah.
outproduce you, right? Like, I don't want you to know my secret sauce is that
Yeah.
when getting into my life, like, understanding my secret thoughts, right? My shame, unpacking all these things are limiting me. And so I'm breaking through limitations and being able to produce at a level that I never even thought I was capable of previous.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to tell you that because I have to beat you.
Interesting.
You
Yes. I
know?
didn't even think about that.
So that is something that I have, especially in the early days of building my coaching practice. I was like, why people are having these transformative experiences? Like, they're telling me that these things are happening, but they're not referring people. I was so confused. I was like, why are they not bringing their friends? Why are they not telling their friends? Because there is either a shame aspect or a competition aspect. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
But to your point, this idea of coachability, yeah, I mean, we can spot it a mile away. I mean, it just doesn't work if if the individual is not open to getting curious, right? So oftentimes we, you know, our brains, we want to be right, and as humans we want to be right so often.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll ask, early clients is are you more committed to being right about that, or are you more committed to experiencing a regenerative, transformative future that you didn't even think was possible? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like we can argue about you being right about this thing, about you being right about this experience that you've had in the world being the way that it is, and all these things, right? Like, we can spend that time doing that. And but is that the best use of our time? Or is the best use of our time you getting curious about where to grow?
Yes.
Like, where that might not be true, right?
Yeah.
Or some other truth could potentially be more true. I'm not saying that what you're saying isn't true. I'm just saying, is there an equal or more true statement or more true perspective that might be in alignment with your vision and more resourceful to you, right?
Yes.
And I've definitely been in those conversations where you're just like, well, this isn't going to work, right? Like, I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here to get curious with you,
Yeah.
right? Is there 1%? I'm asking you a question. I'm not making a statement. I'm not making a judgment. I'm asking you a question about, like your perspective of how people approach you, or your perspective of how people communicate with you, or how you communicate with the world around you. Like, I'm just asking you a question, and instead of you know going hunting for even the 1% truth potentially in this question to grow, you're spending your time proving to me that you're right.
Mm.
Right? So how's that working for you? You know,
Is this a pride issue, do you think? Is it pride? Is it ego? Is it something? Is it fear? I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I guess it could be all.
it's all of those things. It's all
Yeah.
of it's to entertain a new thought is uncharted territory.
Yeah.
If the thing that I have believed for 36 years of my life is is either not true, or I'm considering a more true statement than that, th- it has the capacity to unravel, break down so many things, right? Like, so many things that I've built up, like that these truths, these ideals is what has gotten me to where I am,
Yes.
right? So if these things aren't true, what does that say about me? What does that say about the future? What is it like? I can't. I understand. Like, I have empathy for that experience, because I also have experienced that. And it's like, it is just such uncharted territory. It feels unsafe and scary and new, and what if it fails? What if I'm not good at this in this new space? What if I'm only good at the way that I've done it in the past? Like, what it takes time to build new muscles, and
Yes.
that's the process of reinvention. And reinvention is no joke, man. Reinvention,
Yeah.
it is a heavy lift. and and one of the definitions we have in the firm around vision is a picture of the future that creates passion, and passion enough, right? Like, enough passion that it outweighs the pain of transformation.
And transformation is painful. That's the reality.
It is the reality.
I was just doing some study work just before this, and it was on the Huberman Lab podcast, his last episode. By the time this airs, it's been a few episodes ago. But his guest is a neurobiologist, I believe, and he's talking about learning and how when you have to step into learning something that you're not familiar with, or that maybe you don't like, maybe you hate math, the region of your brain that tells you, I don't want to do this. It's actually the same region where we feel pain. And it is painful on some level to step into it. But what the science says is once you step into it, into the discomfort, and you start doing it, the pain dissipates. It goes
Mm,
away, and now you're capable of 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 really creating these new neural pathways, right? And I'm sitting there thinking about trying to create a new vision in life for folks. You're going to have to create some new neural pathways, most likely. Now, maybe not. Maybe it's going to be very consistent with the path you've been on, and this is just kind of the new season you're moving forward to. But for some of us, it's going to be a radically different vision that a coach could help us create, and it's going to hurt. It's going to be painful for a bit, and you got to step into the pain in order
mhm,
to grow.
Yeah, and that brings up this idea of language as well. Like sometimes I guess like language and neuroplasticity, we have these ideas of, I'm a procrastinator, or I make decisions slowly. I'm indecisive. We have these like I am statements about ourselves,
Ooh, yeah,
really,
those
right? Like really limit us, right?
definition statements versus maybe a characteristic sometimes, or behave past behavior versus the I am. Yeah.
Yes, yes. The occurrence is rooted in language. It
Yeah.
really, really is, right? So this idea of disempowering and empowering language is so interesting as well, because these ideas. I'm not a scientist on any level, but these ideas of neuroplasticity, like even scientifically, it's been scientifically proven that we can change. We can
Yes.
change our mind. We can change our personality. We can change the way that we show up in the world. Like our way of being is not static, r-
Yes.
right? We actually can shift things internally, which can shift things externally. Um, and so I think about what you were sharing there, is that there's so much possibility if we remove some of the barriers around our thinking, and we shut down that part of our brain, right? When we say I can't, our brain stops problem solving, right? Like it stops doing the thing that it's built to do, because it's like, oh, okay, cool. I'll use the energy to do something else. It's like
Yes.
can't, or I am a procrastinator, or I just one of the phrases that we use is up until now, right? Like up until now, I've been a procrastinator. It's a gap in my life that I'm trying to close, right? Like up
Yes.
until now, I've been indecisive, right? But we're not stating these things about ourselves like I am indecisive, because we're just accepting that default future, right? We are so much more capable of so much more than we ever thought or could imagine. Um, and that's one of the things that I can really geek out about in this space of development and growth.
Well, I can say for the listeners, there's another huge value of coaching because, again, I had to hit timeout on life, or I chose to hit timeout on life for 34 days. And I went to a recovery center and did something called cognitive processing therapy, which
Yes.
identified stuck points and requirements in my life. And again, this was the historic events that took place in my life. And from those historic events, sometimes it was loss, sometimes it was trauma. In some cases, it was good events as well. But it created these I am statements. I am a failure. I am a bad dad. I am a bad husband. And when you actually objectively look at the events, when the counselors, took me back to the events where I created these stuck points, uh, objectively speaking, those were not true statements. I may have failed because I yelled at my kids when we have a rule in my house saying we don't yell, we use effective communication. But that doesn't mean I am a failure. It just means I failed in our family's rules of communication there. And how am I going to learn from it and move on? But
Yes. Right.
so powerful because once I was aware of some of these stuck points and requirements that I was living by, it helped me to start catching that line of thinking moving forward in the future. It
Yes.
helped me to catch that thought and go, hold on a second. Let's move that into the light. Is that a true statement? No, that's not a true statement. Let's rework that statement. And I love to hear that that's a foundation of what you guys do in coaching because I think that impacts all of us.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I do. I think we're all guilty of taking a failure and it becoming our identity,
Yeah.
right? Like I think this idea of feedback, we could also relate to a misstep or a mistake as data. We can
Mm,
also relate to it as neutral, right?
yeah.
We could
Yeah.
relate to it as a gift, right?
Mm,
Right. So this idea of, I failed at this, or I misstepped, right, or I made a mistake. It's like, oh, I'm a mistake. I'm a failure. Like, I can't seem to do this correctly. It's like, well, no, 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 no. I misstepped. Like, what goody, we got a gap. I have
yeah.
an opportunity to grow again.
Yeah.
And it feels more loving to me, right? Like I've been in coaching sessions where I'm just beating myself up about that current reality to the vision. There's a gap there. Like I'm beating myself up. It's just this gap, this darn gap. I can't get past this gap. You know, like curse this gap. It's like what? What? The gap is beautifully human.
Yeah.
And so, is it possible to love the gap? What might it feel like to love the gap,
Mm,
and to love self in the process, right? From that current reality into what we envision. And so, I think it's so important to those language, these ideas. It's the three laws of performance. It's an incredible book. You should all read it. But the idea that occurrence is rooted in language, right? And even this is the third law, but even future-based language transforms the way things occur. You know,
oh,
future-based language transforms the way that things occur. And so through
oh,
language, we can start to shift our mind into a new direction, into new pathways, into building those new pathways about ourself, about our future, about what we're capable of, about our friends, about our family, about my wife. Like I can actually create new pathways in my
yeah.
brain, right? From language, man. And so maybe never say ever again that I am a failure. Maybe look at missteps and mistakes as data. And
Yeah. If folks are curious from this conversation, if they're sitting there thinking, man, how do I maybe look into this? What does it look like if someone's like, maybe I want to be coached? Use your guys's the company that you've merged with. Use them as the example. Obviously, there's other coaches out there if people wanted to look into that, but use your guys as an example. What's that first step? How can people kind of explore a little bit more to see if maybe coaching is right for them?
my gut is to say text me.
Okay,
My gut is text me. My number is 678-471-6803. Text me. If you're looking to get a coach, if you're looking to be a coach, we have an incredible institute, a meta performance institute. Novus Global is our website, and mpinstitute.com. You can take a look at those websites. But if you're really interested in figuring out some pathways toward getting a coach or being coached, shoot me a text.
I love that. It makes it super easy for all of you out there that are like, I like to look at I look like to I always buy the car based on what I find on the internet first before I make any phone calls. You got some internet sites that you can
Yeah.
do that. Or
Yeah.
if you like to have the other human being on the other side of the phone to where you can have an active Q&A that makes it pretty open. That's pretty remarkable, brother, for you putting your phone number out there. No, people be gentlemen and ladies. Don't be calling at 2 o'clock in the morning.
The truth is that very few take me up on it.
Yeah,
Very few.
yeah.
So
Why is that, do you think?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think partly maybe it's this kind of this idea of like, oh, I want to be respectful, or I don't want to intrude, or
Mm,
he doesn't want to see a text from me. But I think the more true thing is, if you text me, you might be putting yourself on the hook for something that feels outside of your intuitive fence.
which is pain.
Right? Like that initiation system. We talked a little bit about initiation systems. I was in a conversation yesterday, but that, like, how do we initiate, right? That's the pain, right? The pain isn't actually texting. It's actually very, very easy to text.
Yeah.
but the initiation, the inertia that takes, to take that step to actually form the words and send it, that is a lift in and of itself. And so somewhere in there, most do not take me up on it. So
Yeah.
I'd love for listeners to do so.
Man, I really appreciate that, brother. And that really resonates with me, what you just said about it's not the text itself, it's not the phone call. It's getting yourself to the point of having the phone in hand and doing it. That's the hard part. And I think about the seasons in my career where I was struggling with child abuse cases and death scenes. And the hardest part was telling another human. That was the hardest part. The hardest part was sending the text message or making the phone call. And once I did that, wow, the weight that was lifted off of me,
Yeah.
right? It was actually pretty freeing. Now it didn't mean that made it all better. And I'm talking about my own experience, but life is challenging. Life is challenging. And so having people in your community, both your friends and friends have a place, but friends, most of the time, in my experience, aren't coaches for me. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, you could have a friend that's a great coach, but I'm just saying these different roles in life have different purposes, I feel like. Yeah. Hey, for folks that, I mean, one, you've given your phone number. Are there other ways for people to connect with you or follow uh, what you're doing? Are you on any of the social media things, other websites, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I have an aversion to a lot of social media, and that's my own racket. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
but I mean, I'm on LinkedIn for all the business folks. You can find me, Garland Hunt Jr. on LinkedIn, but also Novus Global is on Instagram, of course. Meta Performance Institute is on Instagram, of course, and you can find us there as well.
I love it. Well, for the listeners, I'm going to make that real easy. All those links are going to be down in the show notes. Garland, time is my greatest commodity. I can't make more of this stuff. And you've given me an awful lot of yours, brother. Thank you.
Chris, I am so grateful for you. Thankful for the honor of being on the podcast with you today. And I know it was a long time coming, so I'm grateful we got to do it today. So God bless you, brother.
Thank you. God bless you. Wow, folks, what did you think about that interview with Garland? I know I said it in the intro, but I didn't realize the depth that we were going to get to. Really appreciated him checking in with me at the beginning of the episode. And then just the meaty stuff that we talked about. And I'm hoping you were asking yourself some questions when he was asking them about your vision in life and about the stuck points that are keeping you from doing the things that you might want to do, that you might be called to do. I think it's time to ask some probing questions of ourselves, and maybe you connect with a coach, maybe you connect with a counselor, and you allow those folks to walk with you through that curiosity process. Hey folks, Jaimie and I are curious about how we're doing here on the podcast. There's a few different ways for you to communicate back to us. First and foremost, please follow us on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. That will cause the next episode to come up in your dashboard. You can also rate and review us if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. There's 5 stars waiting on your main page. We'd really appreciate a 5-star rating if we've earned 5 stars, folks. And if we haven't earned 5 stars, then keep your stars. Instead, shoot me an email at chris@gravityct.com. Let us know how to make it better. Future Marriage Monday topics or guests for me to interview. Folks, we only get to live this life once. Let's go out and take care of the people in our tribes. Take care of each other. God bless.